Alright, so I'm gonna start with a K2 clutch. It's a K2 clutch. And that's probably one of the simplest assemblies here. So to start with, need to replace the seals on a piston. So looking, you see there's a outside seal and there's an inside seal. So the outside seal is an O-ring, and it's a very distinctive one. Has some kind of a ribs on it, so that's the only seal that of that type. So let's see in the bag what I got. So that's the only seal, and it's hard to miss. So that's the O-ring for that. Alright, and on the inside it's a lip seal. So first I need to pull it out. So that's the seal, and you see there's a lip on the inside. So I need to find a seal in this bag. Alright, so that's on the outside. That's the return piston. No, that's the outside. So that's a seal that has the lip on the inside. There's another seal with the inside lip and another seal with inside lip. So now just need to match the size. And it seems like it's that. I think there's two seals of the same size. Yeah, so this one is the same, and this one is a smaller one. So we'll put them aside. Alright, so now need to install the seal. So installing the seal, the pressure comes from this side. So which means that the seal, the lip on the seal has to be pointed towards the pressure side. Alright. So now it's just a matter of slip the seal in the groove there. Okay. And then the O-ring. Okay, so the piston is done. Now this, I'm just gonna leave it. So before installing the piston, a very important step. So if you look inside over here, you see this aluminum ring. So this is kind of called as the piston guide. So the thing is that there's an O-ring between that piston guide and the housing. Now if you had problems where you burned your clutch or something else happened to this particular clutch, you're gonna have to replace that O-ring. Now, I'm not gonna replace it because it's quite involved. My clutches are fine, the K1 and K2, so I'm kind of gonna take a chance and I'm not gonna replace, but I'm just gonna test it, and I'll show later how to test this thing if the O-ring is leaking. But I'm just gonna touch few words on how to replace that O-ring. So if you look behind in the back, you'll see there's 3 rivets over here. So in order to remove this aluminum sleeve, you're gonna have to take a drill, and basically you're gonna have to drill out the 3 rivets. And after you drill them out, you have to countersink this face, and then you thread the ring, and then you install countersunk screws. I can't remember, or I don't know off the top of my head the sizes and all the torques and everything. There's a procedure that Mercedes has, and I guess if you're gonna get that far, it's probably better to seek professional help, because this is needs some really good quality tools and some precision in doing that. So this is, I'm just gonna tell that for information. Now, testing. So if you think that your clutch is fine, you can just do what I'm doing. So I'm just gonna try and test this and see if that thing is leaking. So what I'm gonna do is, for testing, I'm gonna take some clean towel. I'm gonna place it on the table here. Okay. And I'm gonna take just kerosene. If you look, basically the O-ring sits between this wall, if you can see here. So between this wall and the outside diameter of this of the piston guide. So I'm going to take some kerosene and I'm going to pour around, and then I'm going to look on a towel to see if I have any leaks. So that's kind of the theory behind it. Now do not overfill, because you'll see there's a little hole on the side that the oil gets supplied to the piston. So if you're going to fill it up to that point, it will leak. So I think that should do it. So I'm gonna just lift this, make sure that I didn't spill anything and it's dry, and then we can leave it for some time. So you see the towel is dry. Put this down and we can leave it. Just sit like that for a while. Alright, so I think I had about 5 minutes. So now let's lift and see. So everything is dry, so this is okay for installation. So now I need to install the piston into the housing. So first of all, I'm just gonna wipe the sealing surface. Next, I'm gonna need some transmission oil, or transmission fluid, let's call it. And I'm gonna apply some fluid to the surfaces. Alright, now we need to install the piston. So, and very careful so we don't damage the seals and we don't roll the lip. So just basically you push a little bit down, don't push too hard, and just basically turning the piston, and that should bring it all the way down. So next, need to install the springs and the retainer. We have 20 holes and we have 18 springs. So obviously we're gonna have to leave 2 holes diagonally open, or say empty. Okay, so you can see there's one missing, or one hole that doesn't have a spring, and if you turn around 180 there's another hole that doesn't have the spring. Now I'm gonna put the retaining plate, and now probably the hardest in this is to install the retaining ring. So for that we need to compress the springs, okay, and then we can install the retaining clip or the wiring. Now it would be easy if I would have a second pair of hands, but so now that, and this is just so I have enough room to reach for that retaining ring. Now I'm gonna put this plate on top so I can push down on the bearing, and I'm gonna put a nut on top, and I'm gonna start compressing the springs. Just double check that nothing jumped out. No, everything seems to be all okay. Okay, so as it goes over, now all you have to do now is just slide the ring over and slide it down. Okay, now make sure that everything's centered, and we'll keep compressing the springs. And pushing the retaining ring. Okay, seems like the retaining ring is in place. So, looking at the frictions and the reaction plates, so you'll see there's a thin plate and then there's a thick plate. So the thick plate goes on top, that under the retaining ring. So that's the retaining ring over here. So we can start placing them down. And now, even though I cleaned them, I'm just gonna wipe it before I install it. Now make sure that you install, you will see some markings. So that side was against the friction plate. And that's the last plate. So now the last thing is the retaining ring. That just drops in. And let's see which, just based on markings, that side was up and this side was down. I want to turn the retaining ring such a way that the ends would be engaged. Okay, so if you see, both ends are engaged. Now the check Need to make sure that the top plate floats, otherwise you're gonna start wearing the friction plates. And so we need to have about 1 millimeter of clearance between the plate and the retaining 1 millimeter, that's a kind of a nominal gap or nominal clearance. What's allowed, it's between 0.7 up to 1.3 millimeters. That's the clearance you should aim for, but a nominal 1 millimeter, that's kind of a golden average. You're gonna use I need to find where's 1 millimeter. So 0.88 and 0.10, that's 0.98. So if that fits under, no problem. Before you put the clutch away, you want to take and pour some, maybe just an ounce of transmission fluid in the clutch. If you've installed new plates, you should have soaked the friction discs for at least an hour. Now, since I'm reusing the friction plates, I'm just gonna pour some transmission fluid in. Okay, so same procedure for testing the O-ring should be done on a K1 clutch as well. It's exactly the same procedure as I've done on a K2 clutch. So before installing the piston, you fill it up with kerosene, and you let it replace it. It's the same idea. You have 3 rivets on the bottom. The only difference is going to be, again, I think this is drilled with the and tapped with a different size rather than the K2 clutch. Now again, you're gonna have to find out what size exactly. I recall reading somewhere that it's a different size. Alright, so next step. So first, obviously, let's find all the springs and pieces. Okay, so now we need to find the seals for the K1 clutch. So, same idea. There's an outside seal and there's an inside seal. Now, these seals are both lip seals. So we'll start from removing the lip seals. There's one. And there's 2. Now let's go to the bag with the seals. So these are the lip seals. So I can see that's the outside seal. Now we need to find the inside seal. So inside seal has the lip on the inside. So that's inside, inside, that's outside, outside. Outside lip seals go in there. So out of this 2, 1 should be our seal. Okay, this one is obviously too small. Put it back in the bag. And the only one that's left. Yep, so that's the right seal. So we're gonna place the seals over here. Okay, so everything's nice and clean. So this piston, the K1 clutch piston, so pressure goes from this side. So the lips, when you install, have to be pointing this way. Or as the clutch sits, so the seals should be pointing down. And you can tell also that the diameter where the lip goes is a smaller diameter over here. So we'll start from installing the inner seal. Okay, so when you install the seal, just make sure you kind of run your finger around so the seal would sit evenly. You don't want any kinks or anything like that. Okay. Now I'm gonna wipe the housing, the sealing surface. Make sure it's nice and clean. Okay, now we need some transmission fluid. And I'm gonna apply some of that fluid to the sealing surfaces, as you don't want to run those seals dry. Alright, now same goes to this piston. We want to apply some transmission fluid to the seals. So now we need to try and install. This might be a little bit tougher to install, but careful so we don't roll the seals. So we'll try. Yeah, ideally you want to have the tool, which is basically a sleeve of a smaller diameter than the ID of the. So you would slide the seal down, it compresses the seal lip and then just slides in. But since I don't have the tool, we're gonna try and cheat, because I don't see a really, there's no lead on that bottom piece. So alright guys, so I found so-called do-it-yourself method for installing the piston. If you see, the piston is in there, it's installed. So the method that I found that works, there's enough, I guess, clearance. So you slide the piston down. First you're gonna have the inner seal is gonna kind of engage, but there's a nice lead on the shaft, so you're gonna pass it through and you're gonna come down to the point where the outside seal is gonna touch the housing. You'll see over here there's that aluminum piece, kind of the housing, and you'll see that that aluminum piece has a little lead on it. So you're gonna need a tool like that. Mine has a little bit of a turn in it, you see, kind of a bend this way, so which is a good thing. So you want to have this edge, you put it, let's see if you can see, guys. So you put it in like that, you turn it a little bit and you run it around, and as you're running it around, and make sure you don't run it with the sharp edge forward, you run it kind of this way, like that. See, if you see what I mean. So you run it around, same time kind of directing that lip on the inside, and you apply slight pressure on the piston. The main thing here is that you keep the piston level. You don't want one side to go in, because if it goes crooked, then the lip is gonna jump out. So you keep even pressure around, and you keep going round and round, and you can see how the lip will be directed in, and eventually it will slip in. And yeah, and make sure that you take a light and you inspect it. Make sure you don't see any pieces like slivers of black rubber, because that would indicate that the lip seal was installed and was cut. So if everything's nice and clean, it spins. So that would be the way to install the piston for the K1 clutch. Now, if you can't do it this way, then you can make a tool, which basically would be, you take the measurements over here, so that will be your outside dimension of the sleeve, and you take the measurement of a piston, the biggest size of a piston, and that add few hundreds of a millimeter, just so the piston slips in. And that sleeve, you can install it here, and then you can push the piston through, and the lip will be compressed by that sleeve, and then it will slip in. Alright, so that was the hardest part. Now we need to install the springs and the spring retainer. So same thing, we need to count all the springs, because if you remember, there's 20 pins, and I think there are 20 holes over here. And as I recall, there were less springs than that. So there's 21. Ha! Why did I end up with 21? Let's count how many holes we have. So there's 24 holes. Sorry, I guess that's a different part number. So we've got 24 holes and we've got 21 springs. So I guess we need to we put 7 springs and then we'll leave a space. I guess so. Well, let's start. Okay, so this thing is down. Now I just need to make sure that every spring is engaged. Alright. Now the retaining ring. So just gonna drop the retaining ring on top. Alright, now need to compress the springs. So I'm gonna go get the tool that I used on a K2 clutch, and we're gonna install that retaining ring. And here I have a slight problem that I need to compress this a little bit more, but my my bearing race is not high enough. So I need to find something else, so I can need some spacers so I can push that bearing race down more. Okay, I'm gonna go search. Okay, well, maybe I can use the old seal because it's the same size as the bearing, that bearing race, because that's what I used to remove that seal. So that retaining ring is in the groove, and now I can slowly release my tool. Okay. So that got all installed. So I'm just gonna show you guys. So that's the retaining ring. See over here, so it's sitting, and that retaining ring gets captured by this spring retaining plate. So same idea as the K2 clutch, except I don't see a lot of travel on the piston because there's a lot of, not that much room to compress the springs. Okay, now to the Clutchpack installation on a K1 clutch. So the K1 clutch is a bit different than the K2 clutch that I assembled before. So what you have, there are two thin plates that go towards the piston, and I'm trying to find what did I do with it. It's right here. So what do you see? There's a plate that has 3 tangs, and then there's a plate that has 6 tangs. Now you look at the plate with the 6 tangs and you will see that there's clear markings. So this side, the shiny, you'll see that goes towards the friction plate. So place it on like that. This is where the clutch pack is. So you place it towards the friction plate. Now, the plate with the 3 tangs. This is a beveled plate. So acts as a bit of a spring and a bit of a dampening device. And you have to look which way the bevel goes. It's a kind of a cup. So if you haven't marked it when you took it apart, probably not, you will see the markings on the inside. So, and if you look, you place the plate like that, you will see that it cupped. So this is kind of a cup like that. Okay? So that bottom or the inside where you see the markings, that's gonna go towards the piston, because that's where the piston is will be pushing on that plate. So you want to drop it in like that. Same, if you look at the next plate, you will see that the pressure markings will be kind of on the outside. So that make sure that you install the first plate in the correct orientation. Then you drop the next plate. Now I pulled the retaining ring, and look at that, because there's also markings. I don't think there's any bevel or anything in it, but just to make sure that install it right, because if it's any, I don't see any. Looks like just a, but you can see the markings, so that side was installed up, so I'm just gonna install it the same way as it was installed before. Okay, after installation of the clutch pack, we also need to measure the gap. Maybe shake it so it's all settled. Make sure that the retaining ring is all the way up. Yeah, and the gap is pretty much the same as the K2. It's about 1 millimeter. So I think that's okay for me. All right. So to finish this, I'm gonna have to install over my shims. So when we took it apart, we had a bunch of shims, a thick washer, so that actually acts like a bearing race. And this bearing, where is it? Right here. So the shims go down, we install it in. And then this little bearing, so we drop the bearing in, and this is ready for assembly. Now, before assembly, okay, I'm gonna have to get a zip tie just so I can hold this in place. Or for now, I'm just gonna use a clean rag to prevent this bearing from falling out. Just gonna plug it so I can flip it. And now, again, we need to fill it up with a little bit of transmission fluid. Again, you don't want to run this, or you don't want to start the transmission dry, even though if you're gonna fill it, just so I can sleep peacefully. Just kind of soak the friction plates in transmission fluid. To start with, you need to install the lip seal into this housing. Now, the easier way, if you place this in the oven for about 10-15 minutes and set the temperature to about 100 degrees Celsius, and place the seal in a freezer for about half an hour, then you need to drive the seal into the housing. Alright, next Next you need to find the seals. So there are two. One is the O-ring and there's two Teflon seals. And we're gonna start. So first I'm gonna install the O-ring onto this cover. Place it on the table like this. Then the G-rotor goes in, or the pump, they call it a... So, outer ring of the pump. You have to look, you will see there's a chamfer on one side. So this side goes down. Like this. And also, you're gonna see there's a little... not a notch, a little dimple. So that dimple goes up. I kept my pieces in the same orientation just because they already weared in. So I don't think it's important. I think the inner piece is symmetrical, but I'm gonna keep it all the same, in the same orientation, like this. Put some oil. All right, and we can set this aside. Okay, now for the main housing. So there's this intermediate plate. So you need to line it up. You will see this a little opening, and probably you're gonna see some markings from this plate working so long. You can see some markings on the inside, so you'll be sure that this plate goes down like so, and it lines up with this. Okay, now we need to slide this side in, and for that you need to apply some fluid to the O-ring. My transmission was leaking all right, like that. Doesn't matter. So now we need to lower. Basically, you don't want to flip this because these gears might fall out. So I'm gonna just place it on the side like this, turn it around so it lines up. Okay, now because you can't see the holes from this side, I need to get my bolt and insert the bolt from the back, and then start tightening it slowly, and basically pull this outer housing on the inside. So if I recall, it's an M13. Now the reason why I pulled the bolts out, because we need to apply non-hardening sealant to the bolts or to the threads. So I happen to have sealant Forma gasket number 2, which is slow drying and non-hardening. The reason for that, I think, is so the oil would not seep through the threads. Alright, so now that we have them in, this gets tightened and torqued to 13 Newton meters. Okay, so that's the front pump. Okay, so next step, we need to install the return clutch piston onto the front pump housing. I guess they go together. And in order to do that, so we need to get the lip seals. So I got 2 lip seals left in the bag. So the bag goes over there. So these are the seals. I got my bag of goodies. So that's the new spring plate or spring retaining plate. Okay, I got the retaining ring. That's the part number if anybody's interested. Now the reason why I'm decided to replace the retaining ring, because the plate jumped over the retaining ring, so for the cost of, can't remember, $1 something, I decided to get a new retaining ring and a bag of springs. So this clutch has 20 springs. So since all my springs got destroyed, I needed to get some springs too. All right, so I guess to start, I'm gonna need to install the seals. Now, same idea as before. So the pressure is applied from this side of the clutch. So the lip has to be pointing this way. Okay, now I'm gonna get the front pump housing. Okay, so that's the front pump housing, and looks like I might need some support because it's quite wobbly. So to start with, we need to install the piston, and this is going to be again one of those tedious jobs, because without a special tool that Mercedes has, that's going to take some time. And of course, I need to wipe the sealing surfaces, make sure it's nice and clean. I'm going to apply some transmission fluid. Okay, try that again. Yeah, that works better. So with some green tape, so now I got to the outer seal, and for the outer seal I'm gonna need my pick tool, and again I'm just gonna go around. Basically I'm gonna go around like that and make sure that the lip is directed into the Okay, so looks like the seal has started. Now I just need to move it slightly and push down slowly. And alright, so the seal is all the way, oh sorry, not the seal, the piston is all the way down. Now we just need to remove the green tape to wipe it from any glue, if there's any glue left. I can install the 20 springs. Okay, now I'm gonna put this plate on top. Make sure that all my springs get captured. I need to compress the springs in order to install this retaining ring, and I will be using the same I guess you can call it tool now that I've used for the previous retaining rings installed. The difficulty here will be finding a suitable sleeve or like a cylinder or something that can fit over this shaft. Well guys, I've assembled something like that. Basically just put 3 bolts on the bottom with some nuts. Just made 3 legs, and I'm gonna try that. I hope that I'll be able to compress the springs before these legs are gonna slip. So we'll see. So now I need to make sure they all same height and tightened. Okay, so we got this here. I'm gonna put the ring back. I'm gonna put my fixture in. So I'll start the knot, and then I can adjust my the leg position. Now I need to adjust the position of the bolts. All right, let's go slowly. So now need to clean everything so I don't have any stuff left, and I can install the seal rings. Now if you're wondering, this is, if you can see over here, the ends, which way? This is how it's supposed to look. The retaining ring, it's basically kind of a, sits almost inside that retaining plate. So that retaining plate keeps this ring from popping out. Alright, now need to install the seals. Alright, next, the planetary assembly. It took me a while, but I think I finally figured out all the little secrets on how to assemble this part of the planetary. Now this is called rear planetary, and the difficulty in here is the Sprag clutch, this one. Now I advise right away, be very careful, because these little springs, they can jump out, and then you're gonna have really tough time inserting everything back. So handle it with care and very carefully. So to start the assembly, we need to assemble the Sprag clutch. So the Sprag clutch consists of an outer gear, the inner shaft, and the Sprag clutch itself. So installation, what you want to do, you flip this gear around, and you want to make sure that this part of Sprag clutch goes in. So the teeth of the gear is down, and then you take and you insert the Sprag clutch. Now it goes in fairly easy. Now this is the little detail that I found because I could not assemble it correctly, so I had to do some digging. So basically what you want to do now, you want to push the Sprag clutch in. You want to twist it a little bit and basically just push it down. So it's like that. You see, this Sprag clutch is in. Now you want to flip it, and now as you try to install the shaft, it won't go in. So the little secret, or the way I found, you want to push this Sprag out more. You want to apply some transmission fluid to the shaft. It's basically like a bearing race. This is where the rollers are running. Okay, and now you should be able to start this shaft. Just because the rollers, they kind of tapered like that now, so now you can push everything in. Now to push it in, you're gonna have to turn the shaft with the sprags kind of counterclockwise. So now you see the shaft went down. Now you can push the Sprag down, and that is all assembled. The main thing is you don't want this plate to jump out and sit on top of the gear. So it has to be inside. Okay, so when we got the Sprag clutch assembled, we're gonna leave the O-rings outside and we're gonna install the plate. And again, see the little tab or the little pin, so it has to line up with this hole. Okay, so that's all sits together. Now don't forget the shim if you have one. Load the Sprag clutch. Now you take the cover you'll notice there's a little plastic washer, so I apply some transmission fluid so it will just kind of stick to this plate. Line up the little tabs on the washer with the holes. Okay. And now you lower that on top. Next, we can install the retaining ring. Okay, make sure it's engaged all around. And now we need to measure the gap. So we flip it around, push on this, kind of like that down, and I need to check what the gap is supposed to be. Should be 0.05 millimeter to 0.2 millimeters. So I'm gonna start with the smallest size. So I'm going to use the 0.05 millimeter, which is 2 thou. And you want to insert it, and you want to make sure that the filler gauge goes in. Okay, so 0.08 goes in. So I think I'm okay, because 0.10 millimeters doesn't go in, but 0.08 millimeter goes in. So I think that should be okay. Let's double check. So 0.1 millimeter. Yep, so 0.1 doesn't go, 0.08 goes in, and which means that we are within the required spec. And I wouldn't think that there would be any problems, because I'm not using any new parts. These are all parts that I'm reusing. Okay, so we measured the gap. The gap is fine, and the purpose for measuring the gap so that the plastic washer is not riding hard on the bearing, on that face there. So you need to have some clearance there. So now that we made sure that there's clearance, we can install the O-rings back. And for that, I'm going to remove the retaining ring. Okay, now I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to install the O-ring in the plate. Now we need to pull the Sprag out. flip it, pull this plate out, install the O-ring, line up the plate again and put it back. Like, make sure that the O-ring is seated properly. Okay. That's all good. That's all in place. Now I can put the retaining ring in. Now, because I installed those O-rings, I'm gonna have to apply some pressure to this part so it compresses the O-rings, and then I can install the retaining ring into the groove. So push it down and with a screwdriver, I guess starting from one end. Alright, so the easiest probably, you can pull the sun gear, and the sun gear just dropped it in like that. Now you want to make sure that the bearing is inside. There's a thrust bearing, and now you can just slide this shaft inside. Now give it a little turn. Okay, so the sun gear is engaged with the planet gears. Okay, so now what do we have left? I have left 3 bearings. So as I recall, this split bearing, or the roller bearing, or needle roller bearing with the split, goes in here. So I'm just gonna put some oil on it, or transmission fluid, and I'm just gonna slide it over. Careful so you don't lose any rollers. Okay, so that goes there. Now the other side, you see in here, you have a thrust bearing. So that goes like that, and the needle roller goes over here. So that is the rear planet, or the rear planetary. Now the front planetary, I think it's a little bit easier. Because this thing comes all assembled. So what you want to do, you want to make sure that you have the bearing inside on this side. And you have this bearing race installed. Actually, I don't think you can remove it, but it has to be there. So now we place the bearing, the thrust bearing over here, I'm gonna apply some transmission fluid. And I'm gonna install this from this end and engage it. So that's the forward planetary. Okay, so we lower the front planetary inside. Okay, and now I can install the retaining ring. So for that I'm going to use a bucket and a 2x4, and conveniently I have a 2x4 with the notch that I'm going to position like that, and I'm going to take this, I'm going to lower like that. This is all engaged. So now I can install the retaining ring. Now, to complete this assembly, we need to install a Teflon ring or a Teflon seal into this groove over here. I think this is the input shaft. Yeah, because this is the front and that's the rear. So that's my Teflon ring. This is a used one that I removed before. So there's one. And there's a second one. Now I'm not sure why they give two. Maybe I think this is a really brittle material. It's not a Teflon, so it's really easy to break it. So I'm just gonna double check. So it's exactly 2 millimeter thick. This is 193. This is 197. Alright, I forgot which one. The 194. I'm gonna put it in the bag. I can't remember, but maybe it's a spare. So now, carefully, I need to slide it all the way from the end, all the way up to here, and then spread it and put it into the groove. Okay, so that's the ring installation. Now, one little detail that we need to apply some grease so it would keep the O-ring closed, because it's opening, and if we try to install the other piece it might catch it and break. So I'm gonna have to open it up. Use some Parker grease, just a little bit, and put some grease into this groove. not too much though, and that grease will keep this will keep this seal basically together. Okay, so in this case I'm just gonna use some green tape. Just get a piece of a green tape, and I'm gonna put with a non-sticky side towards the O-ring or towards the seal. So the non-sticky side, and I'm just gonna wrap it around like that. Now I can put another piece of tape, and now with the sticky side down, because I want to apply some pressure to compress this ring. All right, so that looks like that's pretty much it. Now, for some reason, I have the instructions that I have are telling me to install 2 Teflon rings in here, but I don't have them. So I think there was a revision, and they got rid of this of these Teflon rings. Or maybe that's on a 722.3. That might have been. So for 722.424, I don't have these Teflon rings, and I think that's it for this for the Planetary. Almost forgot one little detail. So this plastic ring gets installed inside this gear. So you'll see the little tabs over here. So these tabs go down, and there's a tooth. I guess that's to engage it so it wouldn't spin. So now I need to install it and try not to crack it, because removing it was a bit complicated, and I think it's pretty brittle. So we'll try doing it. Well, I tried to get this ring inside anyway, so I managed to get it in, and the way that it works easier, you feed one side all the way down, and then you keep pushing the other side. So this way the ring kind of compresses and gets installed. But I'm gonna still try and get a new piece, because this one, even though probably it's not doing much, but I hate to see it breaking in half. Okay, next few things that need to be done before we start the final installation is need to replace this seal. Now I actually so pull the seal. There's a retaining ring or circlip inside, and you can drive this bearing out very carefully. Do not hammer on the inner race. Yeah, so use a thin punch and you can catch the edge of the bearing, because if you hammer on the inner race, you need to install a new bearing. Now I did pull the bearing out and I did check it. To me it seemed okay, so I reinstalled the bearing back, put the retaining ring, and then drive the seal in. Alright, next step, need to install this, call it a tail piece. So I've done that, I couldn't film it. So basically what you need to do is find the O-ring. If you have removed this piece, find the O-ring in a kit, insert the O-ring in a groove, apply some Parker O-lube, and then you have to line up that the tail piece, because the bolts are offset, if you noticed. So you can use longer bolts. I think these are M6 bolts, so you're gonna need 2 or 3 longer bolts, so you can start the threads and slowly, in alternating pattern, you can basically pull this piece in till it bottoms up. So that's pretty much. And when you're done that, you can find the 2 Teflon rings and install them in the back. Let me just flip this thing. So if you see here, where's my, okay, see down here there's 2 Teflon rings that go in. I think that's it on that. So after you insert the bolts, probably I'm gonna apply some Loctite, and this gets tightened to about 11 Newton meters. So next step, you need to find this thrust washer and need to install it down there. So make sure that you can see there's a tab over here, and down here you can see there's a hole. So this tab has to go into this hole. Place it and it sits there. So next, need to take the B2 or the rear brake band, and we drop it down into the housing. So just drop it down, reach and squeeze it, and that's where the rear band sits. Alright, next need to install the truss body for the B2 brake band, but before I can do that, need to install the O-ring over here. I get 197 and the old one I get about 2.02. So I think that's the right O-ring. Okay, so now I'm gonna place the O-ring in a groove. I'm gonna apply some transmission fluid to the O-ring. Yeah, this kind of has a little bit of rust and kind of a very rough. It's a little bit of a rust, like surface rust. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna use some Scotch-Brite on this surface. Alright, so a little bit of polishing on this chamfer. I'm gonna apply some grease or O-ring lube. And I'm gonna try to reinsert this. Okay, I guess let's call it installed. So now I can put the brake band back where it should be. Alright, so we got the B2 band, or the rear brake band, in. We got the truss body in. Okay, let's move to the next. Alright, so next step, we need to install, it's going to be a K2 clutch. Sorry, we need to install the K2 clutch on our Planetary assembly. So we find that's the output shaft. So we insert like that. Before I take a little tool and I try to line up all the friction discs. Make sure that the K2 clutch sits all the way down, and every plate is engaged here. Went down more. You can see that this sits all the way down. Okay, and the two bearings, they almost level. Okay, so next step, we need to slide that assembly, the Planetary assembly with the K2 clutch, into the housing. So for that, I'm gonna place the housing on the table just to make sure. So the K2 clutch sits good, as it should. Let's see the seals. Yeah, the Teflon seals are all in place, so we are good there. So this time I'm just going to put some kind of a support, hold the transmission more kind of a level. Okay, so I got this all assembled again. Now, to check that the Planetary is installed correct, you need to look and see that this surface on the Planetary connecting gear, this is the outside gear that connects two Planetaries, is lower than the support surface for the plate, so that surface. So this surface has to be lower than that surface. Alright, so next we need to install this dampening spring. Now the dampening spring goes, you'll see there's a space right there, and to me, I'm not entirely sure, but I think it goes like that. But just by the looking on the markings, I think that's, and the way this thing would sit when it's installed. So I'll go with that. The little tab is going to be pointing up or towards the center. So just place it down here, push and slide. Okay, let's see. So you can see how that spring sits in there. All right, next. Okay, so this plastic support or base support piece gets installed on the bottom, closer to the valve plate. So, by the look of it, this support goes in here. I think it sits kind of like that. That looks like a right place for that. So it's on the bottom, that's why they call it a support kind of an insert. But I think I will install it when I have all the clutch pack in place. Okay, so the reverse clutch and clutch pack. So I got my steels here, and I got, that's my new set of friction, and that's the number if you guys interested. And I did buy this from Cobra Transmissions. You can find that place online. They have quite a selection of parts for this transmission. So now the thing is that the friction needs to be soaked in transmission fluid for 1 hour. So here, placed my frictions in transmission fluid, and I have to leave them for about an hour. Alright, for those who's interested, and I forgot to mention, I did measure the thickness of the new friction plates, and they are 2.1 millimeters. So kind of like that, pretty much the same as my other friction plates. So while the friction discs are soaking, I'm just gonna go over and look at the friction plates, or the steel plates. So the reverse clutch, so we have one thick plate with a little bevel on the inside. So that plate goes first this way inside. Then you start stacking your friction and then steel plate, friction, steel, and you get to the last plate, the steel plate that you installed, and at the top you have this beveled washer, and you notice it's basically like a cup. So this bevel washer is installed like this. Okay, you can see that. The reason is that if you look at the reverse clutch, it pushes on the outside edge of this washer, and this is the washer that this plastic piece basically kind of supports on the bottom like that. Alright, so frictions are ready for installation. Now we put the last steel plate. And now the beveled washer, like I said, bevel like that, so the small diameter that's going to push, so the cup is this way, so it goes in. Now we can install this plastic piece. So just down here to support this bevel washer. Okay, now we can install the K2 clutch. So make sure that you have the shims and the bearing. So just lower it in. Okay, and of course take a screwdriver and line up the friction plates. Okay, so now we need to remove the tape. And now we're ready, we can slide in this clutch. Now just put the transmission on some blocks. And give it a good shake. Make sure that all the frictions are engaged. Alright. So now, because we installed new clutch plates, and just to be sure, we need to measure the distance. Sorry, not to measure the distance, but we need to make sure that this clearance between that bevel washer and the piston. So we want to have some clearance, otherwise the clutch will be dragging. So to do that, we take a caliper, and first I'm just gonna do like a rough measurement, and if the measurements are really close, then I'll have to be more creative and do more precise measurements. So from the face over here down to the bevel washer, to the edge that the piston is pressing on. So we go from this face can't see like that. Where am I measuring? Okay, I got 86 on this side. I got 85.72 over here. .3, and on this side okay, try again, and I got 86.2. Okay, so let's call it kind of an even number. Let's call it 86 millimeters, the distance from this face to the bevel washer. Now I'm going to move the camera to the clutch piston. So we need to measure from this point to this face. So I'm gonna kind of go on the angle a bit, but I got 84 and a half. Let's turn it around. So 84 and a half. So we got 86 and we got 84 and a half here. So we have about 1.5 millimeter clearance. So that will ensure that the clutch is not dragging. Okay, so we're good. Plus, let's see how thick is the gasket. So there's a paper gasket there, which will add some clearance. And I'm looking at the old gasket that already been used and it's compressed. So this adds another half a millimeter. So we have about 2 millimeter clearance. So the difference in these dimensions, or let's say clearance, should be from 1.5 to 2 millimeters. Now, if you're not getting that dimension, or say you replace the steel plates, you're gonna have to adjust that dimension by changing the steel plates. They are available in different thicknesses, so you need to play with the thicknesses to get to that 1.5 to 2 millimeter clearances. Since I'm reusing all the parts, it's pretty much set as came from the factory. Alright, so next we need to install the brake band B1. And to start, so first we need to lock it, obviously, and even before that we need to soak it. So I had it soaking for an hour in transmission fluid. So next we need to lock this in place. Okay, so the brake band B1 pin of the lock says to be facing thrust body. So the thrust body is on the driver's side, which is, I guess, left side of a transmission, facing this way. So it will be like that. So next we need to install the thrust body B1 and an overload protection switch. So for that need to find all the O-rings. So I got 3 O-rings in my bag. So looking closer, I realized that the O-rings actually get installed over here. So there's one O-ring, second O-ring here, and as I said before, there's one ring over here. Alright, so I need to remove this. It's quite brittle. Okay, so this is a new piece. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna first put it like this, put the pin, and then slide this on top. Alright, so the socket works fine. So what is that? That's a 10mm socket. So it pushes it and keeps the pin in there. So I'm going to install the O-ring over here. Nah, that doesn't look right. It's too big. So the small O-ring, it doesn't look right. It's just really loose on here and it's too big for that. So we'll keep looking, but these O-rings should be fine. Okay, that's one of. And the next one goes in here. Okay, so this one's ready. This one I'm gonna have to look. See if I have a different O-rings. No, unfortunately, for some reason, I don't have this O-ring on the switch. But I think I'm gonna install the old O-ring for now. And later I might go and buy the O-ring, because this I can remove it even when the transmission is installed. So this O-ring still looks fine. Yeah, so this O-ring is okay. We'll put the old one for now. Alright, so I think we're ready for installation. Alright, so to install the truss body, I'm gonna try and use just transmission fluid. For the O-rings. See if that will be okay. So line up the brake band so you can see the Alright, I think that's in place. Interesting enough that there's no seal or anything in here. I guess we rely on these O-rings so it would prevent oil from leaking. Okay, 70 Newton meters. Alright, next we need to install this bend guide on the other side. So, and we need to make sure that the pins engage. So we push it all the way down. Okay, I think we're ready to install the front pump. So let's stand up the transmission. So I'm gonna apply some transmission fluid over here to the seals. Alright, so paper gasket. So what we're looking here is on the housing. There's two small holes. There's one here and one here, and I guess this opening on this side. So let's look at that and see the gasket has small hole, and this opening. So that should go like so. Okay, so that fits the paper gasket in. Figure out, so this hole over here has to match to this hole over here. So we flip it like so. Make sure the Teflon ring is in there. Check it again, so it's this hole. And it's down. So make sure everything lines up. And it's asking me to coat the bolts with a non-hardening gasket sealant. So I'm gonna apply a little bit of sealant to each bolt. So what I'm using is a Forma gasket number 2. It says slow drying, non-hardening. So we tighten the bolts in a crisscross pattern, and then we're torquing it to 13 Newton meters. Alright, now we can assemble the tail end. So for that, I'm going to have to flip the transmission. Alright, so starting on the tail end, the order is going to be like so. So first of all, you see guys, there's 2 retaining rings. So first I need to slide one ring down, then install that, then this ring slides down to keep it there, then this bushing goes on top with this side down, and then we have a bunch of shims here. The shims goes on top like this, and all this is finished with the parking pole gear that sits like that. So all this needs to be assembled, and the first we need to slide down the retaining rings. So the right tool would have made my life easy, but since I don't have it, I'm gonna use a crescent wrench. And the way to do that, you set it up to the size, just a little bit big. Put the retaining ring down, place the tool on top. Alright, so the retaining ring sits in the first groove. So now I need to get it out of there and push it down into the bottom groove. Now this plastic gear can go in. Make sure it captures the okay, now same idea. We need to install the second retaining ring. Okay, so got it on the first diameter. Got it down. Now just using the screwdriver, slide it off down here. Okay, so both retaining rings are down. The gear is in place. Now this bushing, so we slide it in and you see this machining is done so it fits over the retaining ring and kind of captures it in there so it doesn't come out. So we slide this down. Now we put the shims, and obviously I usually put the thicker shim, goes on top. And now the parking gear, I'll call it a parking pole gear. So there's bigger holes and smaller, so I'll go for try to line it up. And, oops, oh, got it exactly. So that's in place. Now what I can do is probably install the parking pole gear. Oh, sorry, not the gear, it's a parking pole. I just need to remember. So it goes like that. That engages the gear when you put your car in park. Okay, so and it acts kind of like that. That's your parking. So this spring needs to be pushing the parking pole away from this gear like that, which means it has to go like so. This go. Okay, not sure if you see. So that's how the parking pole spring is put in. Okay, now I can install the linkage with the roller that actuates this this parking pole. Alright, so that's the linkage. Installation's fairly simple. You slide it through, bring it up like this, put this little roller on the end, and all this is captured by this guide. So slide the guide on top and lower it in. and when you engage your parking brake, you pull on that, and that engages your parking. So it spins. Now when you pull, alright guys, let's backtrack a little bit, and before we install the cover, or the back cover here, let's install the governor. So the governor goes on this side, and then we're gonna install this little cover with the new gasket. It goes on that side. So the governor, it's this thing. Now this is just, we need to slide it in, squeeze this retaining ring, and you'll see there's a groove, so that ring fits in the groove, and that's what holds this in place. If you see, so there's the groove. Okay, where's the groove? Right there. And you see this opening, so this is where the two longer ends of the retaining ring fits. Okay. And obviously the other part fits over here. So you need to pay attention the way it's installed, but I'll show that later. So before we install the governor, we need to install the O-ring in the groove. And looking through my bag of O-rings, that's the old one, and the only one that fits, it's this O-ring. That's the closest size. So I'm gonna use this O-ring to put it in. Alright, so before we start installing the governor, I just need to make sure this is all clean, especially inside there, because this is where the hydraulic plunger is working. Alright, now I'm gonna start putting it in. Line up this okay, I can see that the thing lined up. I can see it from the bottom that it's all in place. Now this is engaged. Now I just need to get a tool and compress. So let me just turn this transmission around so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so you can see the tab is over here and it's all inside. Now the retaining ring, if you can see, it's down on the bottom, and the two long legs are sticking down. Now from this side you can see the two legs, so you need to reach with the tool and squeeze those two legs and install the retaining ring. Now if you have proper retaining ring pliers, that's good. If you don't, I just used needle nose pliers. Just basically from a side, reach in, squeeze it, push it in, let go. So the thing is all installed. It's not coming out. Alright, next we can install the cover into here and then the retaining ring. Okay, probably need to apply some transmission fluid so it would slide easier. Alright, and now Come on. I'm just gonna install that. Okay. Make sure it's all seated in. And then with a screwdriver, just pull the cover. Make sure it's okay. So that's all seated in. Alright, so on some vehicles, I'm not sure which model or which transmission model, they do have a secondary pump in here. Well, my transmission doesn't have it. So if you have a secondary pump, you put an intermediate plate, just like a primary pump. Then you have an O-ring to install, and then you install the secondary pump and the cover. Now, in my case, I don't have a secondary pump, so that's why I have this kind of a aluminum gasket with double-sided rubber covering or some kind of a material, and I think this is just like a blanking plate. Now, the one thing to notice is that this cover has a little groove over here and a little hole, and if you look at the plate, there's two little holes. So these two little holes have to kind of line up with that, but I don't think you can go wrong because the holes offset, so you can only install this gasket one way, and I think it's like so. If you flip it, you can line up the bolts, so it's only one way that you can install it. So I'm gonna go clean up this cover, and then I'm gonna install this secondary pump cover in place. Alright, so cleaned up the cover a little bit. Now I'm just gonna put the gasket in place like so, and I'm gonna find the bolts. Okay, and so just because it has a soft gasket, we kind of need to make sure that we go even. So again, alternating pattern, and we're gonna start from here. Okay, now before installation, I'm gonna prepare this output flange, and I want to paint it because it was kind of rusty. So I'm using the plastic coat rust converter. So I applied it. Need to let it dry, and when it dries, the rust will convert into some kind of a gray coat. So after that, we might need to apply one more coat, or I can prime it and then just give it a light coat of black paint. Alright, so now we're ready to install the rear cover, but before we install the rear cover, we need to do a little check, because we want to avoid interference, so we don't push on the bearing race while the transmission is spinning. So what we need to do, we need to check the distance from this shoulder to the mounting face, and we need to check the distance from this face to the bearing race, and we need to make sure that the gap is 0.3 millimeter plus minus 0.1 millimeter. Alright, so let's measure that. So I got 30.03, and I'm going to measure on opposite side, and I got 30.03. So I think that's pretty good. Now this is still not as straight as it should be, so this is I would use this as a reference. If you changed parts and you're doing that, you do need the proper tools. Alright, now I need to measure the distance from this face to the bearing race. And using the same straight edge, so 39.4. Okay, 39.55, 39.54. So we got about, I guess, 0.5 millimeter clearance, which is a little bit more than needed, but let's take in consideration that this paper gasket is its new paper gasket hasn't been compressed. So I think I'm satisfied with these measurements. Main thing is that I do have the clearance between the bearing race and this face. Okay, now I'm gonna fit the rear cover on top. Like so. I'm going to insert all the bolts, and we need to tighten the bolts to 13 Newton meters. Alright, just going back to that flange. So you see it's been sitting there for a while, and the rust just turned into this almost dark brown coating, and this is paintable now. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to throw it on the sun, let it dry, and then put a little coat of primer and then some black paint, and that's going to look awesome on my rebuilt transmission. Alright, so back to the tail end. So that's my flange, got all painted, it dry. So now I'm just going to install it, and let's see. So what do I have in the bag here? So in the bag I have a washer, I have this nut, and an O-ring. So obviously first I need to drop the washer in, and the O-ring, so I need to find my new O-ring that goes, there's a groove inside, I need to install the O-ring. And this washer, you see it's deformed, so I do need to find the new washer. Okay, so that's the closest O-ring that I have. Come out. And now I'm gonna drop this flange in. And if you guys remember from this assembly, I did mark one of the over here. I put the mark, so that mark I want to line it up with this little, let's see if I flip it, with this little indent on the shaft. I just want to do that. Okay, so that's the output shaft, and that's the new washer. So there's nothing there, no Loctite, no nothing. I'm just gonna install the washer. Now I'm not gonna tighten it right now, or let's say I'm not gonna torque it at this point, but if you guys want to do that, so you need to either set the park brake and then you can torque this, probably that's better, or you can hold the flange and you need to torque this nut. So this nut gets torqued to 120 newton meters, and after you torque it, you need to deform the nut into that indent, so to prevent the nut from loosening. So basically, if you see this, you see how it's deformed like that? So that's what you're gonna have to do when you're done torquing this, the output flange nut. Alright, and because I'm not going to be torquing the nut right now, and the reason is because I don't have the socket. I'm going to have to go get a socket for this. I'm going to put myself a reminder saying that I need to torque this nut. Alright guys, now we need to install this pin and this washer, so into the rear band, which is the B2 band. Now I'm not sure, probably I should have done that before, because then it would have been much easier, but let's figure out now. So first I need to install this retainer. Obviously I can't slide it through this end, so it's gonna go carefully so I don't break it. It's installed like that. Now the smaller diameter goes in a truss body, and the bigger diameter goes in a brake band. Alright, now, so if I compress this and I go behind, I should be able to fit it in. Alright, it's in place. Now just a matter of pushing this plastic ring and lock it on the truss body. It's in place now. It wasn't that difficult. I'll just had to push it a little bit so the pin is there. This band is here. Now, so we don't drop it or we don't lose it, I can just take this plastic piece that holds the brake band in place. We leave this up, position that straight, and drop it in place. Now we just need to push on the brake band and slide this plastic piece in place. And that is installed. Yeah, so that's just like so. So now we can install the modulator valve. So that's the modulator valve. Need to find the thrust pin. So this plastic piece goes like so. And before installing, need to find the O-ring. So that's my old O-ring, and that's the matching O-ring in a kit. So I'm gonna slip this O-ring on top. Fits like so. Now also need to install this plate. This is the retaining plate for the valve. Alright, so that's gonna go like so. And now we need to use some transmission fluid to lubricate really good the O-ring and the pin. Okay, put the pin in place. Alright, put the plate in place. Like so. Now it's gonna be a little bit tough. So we're gonna position it. So I think that's how the modulator valve goes in. Now just need to use the two screws and bolt it here and here. Next, down here we have the gear selector. So the gear selector has this metal, well, it's a seal with the metal kind of ring on the outside. So the kit has two seals, so you need to select the one that's appropriate. So this is the seal that goes here. Now you can switch to a 12mm socket and just drive the seal down. We pull the shaft. So line up this piece over here, and then I can slide the shaft in. So this gear is timed. I just need to loosen the bolt that's holding it over here. Maybe just remove the bolt completely. So now this shaft's supposed to go in. Okay, so that's in. Can install the screw back. Now I'm going to use some Loctite on that. And while we're here, that would be a good time to replace this bushing if yours is old and deteriorated. So now we can fit the switch, and we need to make sure that this arm engages in here. So you take this arm and it fits like so. So now my switch had an extra set of washers, and I think those washers were under the switch. Alright, to position the starter lockout switch, what you need to do is move the arm, and you'll find there's a detent right here. If you go over, you can still go, but it returns to this position where you see there's a detent. Okay, now you want to take a 4mm pin or a drill bit, insert it in, and you want to line up so that the drill bit will go through the bottom arm, like that. So now in this position, when they're all lined up together, you can tighten the bolts. The bolts are tightened to 8 Newton meters. So now we're gonna move to the brake band B2 actuator, or server, how it's called. So for that we need to replace this Teflon ring, and I'm gonna open up this. I think there's another seal inside, so I need to open up and check it inside. Alright, so what is there? There's a little spring and a little holder that holds the spring in place. Okay, don't see any seals yet. So there's a sleeve inside. Okay, so this sleeve has a Teflon ring. And this is, I think, acts like a check valve. Alright, let's go find the right seal. Okay, so let's remove this Teflon ring. Okay, and back to this. So we're gonna need this ring and this one. Just gonna make sure that that's the right thing. Yep. Okay, now I'm just gonna wash. I need to wash this little piston. Okay, I'll be back. Right, so I got this thing washed. Now I'm just gonna install this split ring in the groove. Okay, I'm gonna go wash this piston on the inside. Okay, this got cleaned. So now we need to apply some brake fluid. And slip this. Okay, so have had to help it a little bit with a thin screwdriver just to push this ring inside, and it went in, though I still don't really like how easy it moves inside, but I guess okay. Now I'm gonna wash the 3 parts and install it back. This time just place it on a table, and you can compress the spring with your finger and just install the retaining ring. Okay, next I need to remove this Teflon ring. So kind of like so. Just stretch this ring and get out. Oops, sorry. Alright, now for the ring installation, if you turn, you'll see there's a little lead on that side. So I'm just going to position it like so. And I'm going to start okay, need some support, so but I guess you guys got the idea. Alright, sorry I couldn't show it, but you kind of got the idea, so just work it in and it will get seated. Now to help the installation, you want to take this and throw it in the freezer and leave it there overnight. Okay, now let's install the rear servo. So we have 2 red O-rings. Obviously the bigger one goes here. Need to find the O-ring groove. Okay, and the other O-ring obviously goes in here. Alright, so now in the bag that I have, so I have this plastic insert that goes in, and then I have the lip seal, so that's the last seal in the bag as well. So I'm gonna go wash this seal and find this one. Probably no. So that insert goes first. So that's the last seal in the bag. Now, next, after we installed this plastic ring down there, okay, we need to install the seal. Now the first motion, you're probably going to try to install the seal like that, but pay attention because the seal goes this way. This is the pressure side, okay, so the lip has to be pointing the piston or the servo. So it goes like that. Now ideally you want to use a mandrel for this size, but since I don't have one, I'm gonna go and use a socket. Alright, now apply some transmission fluid over here. So that's the piston. It's been sitting in my freezer and you can see that white ring actually shrunk. So now I'm going to try and install it. So we need to put the pin. Now there's a little groove, so the groove goes into the band. Okay, now the thing is going to be to actually catch this pin. Okay, I think I got it. And it went in. Okay, I think now we have the cap. So the cap went in. Now just gonna install the retaining ring. So now this cap has to come back and lock. Alright, so this is all the way back. So next, need to install the kickdown solenoid. Now the kickdown solenoid has some O-rings. So the solenoid has 1, 2, 3 O-rings. Oh, sorry, has 1, 2, 3 O-rings. So I found the O-rings that I need to replace. Okay, so we install this in here. I'll try to squeeze it over the O-ring. Now, one more thing. So you need to find the new washer. Goes over here. And now the thing is ready to be installed. Okay, so I think the kickdown solenoid is installed this way because it still doesn't interfere with anything. Okay, and the thing gets torqued to 20 Newton meters. So it's not a lot of torque, but that's what it says. Alright, so next we're gonna do B1 piston. So on a B1 piston, have the pin, don't lose this shims. Now we need to find this little O-ring that goes in here. Alright, on the piston itself, so we have the lip seal. So we're gonna install the lip seal in here. Probably easier from that's nah, I'm wrong. So it's gonna go from this side, and I need to stretch it over. Okay. All right, let's see what's next. Okay, next, after we dropped the B1 band in, we need to install the piston. So for that, there's this plastic piece. You see the pins over here. So this engage on the bottom. So that goes in like so. Now we put the two springs. Now apply transmission fluid to the O-ring and to the seal. This goes like so. And we're supposed to compress this and push it in. But I think it's quite difficult to do it with just with your hand. So I do need to come up with a tool. Now, obviously, since we replaced the brake band, we need to make sure that there's clearance. So ideally, if you have the tool, you would compress this band completely and then let go, and you want to measure that the clearance is about 2 millimeters. But since I don't have the tool, I'm just gonna look like that. So it seems like the clearance should be okay, and I've tried to compress it with a screwdriver. It's not working really well, but I can see that I can probably have about 1 millimeter. So if I have a better tool and apply more pressure, then probably there's going to be about 2 millimeter clearance. Alright, next we can install the front cover. And the front cover with the pump. So the gasket is in place here. Need to apply some oil to the seals always. And now we need to drop this front cover in. Make sure the bearing is installed inside there. Alright, and let's see. So that's the top. So that's the front cover. Now the bolts, my instructions are asking me to apply a little bit of non-hardening sealant I'm not really sure what it does, but probably just keeps the bolts from coming out. So I'm not sure if Loctite would have done the same thing, but we'll use the sealant. Okay, now that we have everything installed, we can install the valve body in place. And before we do that, we need to install this little plastic piece. It looks like a deflector or something. So looks like that goes in here. Okay, the last item to be installed is this little tube. Where is it? Here. So that item is installed in here, and the way it's installed like that, so the tube is pointing to the front like this. Just slide it in. Done. So now we're ready to install this plate, and before we do that, need to install this little pin from the detent. Otherwise you won't be able to install the pin when you install this plate. So the pin goes in here. Okay, this tube goes in. Okay, so that seems in place. So the tube is in. Alright, so now we can install the detent. Okay, I'm just tightening, I'm not torquing it yet. Oh buddy, so here we just need to get this pin on the gear selector inside that plastic piece, and with the kick down cable need to pull it back. Carefully drop it in. Okay, and it seems like we got that in place. Alright, so we got all the bolts inserted. So now we just need to tighten it up. So all these bolts get torqued to 8 Newton meters. Alright, so now I can put the filter, and I can put the bottom pan. So that's the filter. Now I just need to find the screws from here. Okay, so cleaned up the pan, put a new gasket. Also, this car doesn't have with the magnet, but I did buy this little magnet that I want to throw in. So by the look of it, this bracket goes in the front on this side, and this one goes on this side. Okay, all the rest of the bolts. Okay, put the pan down, insert all the bolts, and tightening torque 8 Newton meters. Okay, now that we turn the transmission around, I'm going to install the new breather. So it goes in here. And all we have left is we need to tighten the nut on an output yoke or output flange, and we have 3 plugs to install. And the plugs, so there's 2 plugs on this side, there's 1, 2 over here. These plugs are used to measure the pressure on the working transmission, and another plug is on this side. Also in the kit we need to find last 2 O-rings. One O-ring goes in here, and this is for the kickdown cable. And another O-ring goes for the dipstick tube. Alright, so and that for the dipstick tube O-ring. So in the kit find this 3 crush washers that go on the plugs. I'm gonna just install these plugs, but I'm not gonna tighten it because later I need to connect the gauges to measure the pressure.